Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Resistance Bureau, our forum that is dedicated to highlighting the leaders and activists at the forefront of the enduring struggle for freedom, both in Africa and around the world. Today, it is a privilege to host His Excellency Ian Khama, the former president of Botswana, who served his nation with distinction from 2008 to 2018. Under President Khama's stewardship, Botswana emerged as a beacon of democratic hope and good governance, consistently earning recognition for its commitment to free institutions while achieving robust economic growth. Since leaving office, President Khama has continued to play a pivotal role in advancing democratic principles and accountability, speaking out against sham elections, rising autocracy, and the unlawful seizure of power across Africa. His commitment to these values has made a much needed and valuable impact, inspiring those who still believe in the ideals of servant leadership. President Khama, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
An honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's jump right in. Mr. President, you have surely witnessed the growing debates that have been ongoing from academics and even a growing chorus of self-proclaimed Pan-Africanists who contend that core democratic principles such as presidential term limits, for example, are somehow ill-suited to the African context. How do you personally respond to those who argue that such foundational values cannot take root or otherwise be respected on the African continent?
You know, we really cannot allow the interests of individuals who find themselves in leadership positions to dictate the political agenda for the African continent. It's just been so unfortunate that for many years, decades even, that in quite a number of countries on Africa, those who assume leadership positions have wanted to see themselves as the only ones who could be able to run the country, their countries, and want to be incumbents indefinitely. But if you were to ask the people of Africa that are they satisfied with that particular system, if we talk about democracy, I would answer it in the following manner: is that if you look at Christianity, Christianity is embraced by people all over the world. It doesn't matter what countries they come from, what ethnicity they are, they believe in one God. So even in the democratic system, a system that should be embraced all over the world for the same reason. And yes, we don't have to be, clones of the Western democratic systems. We can still grow homemade type of that puts people at the forefront of governance and not of individuals. So I really believe that where we have gone wrong on the continent is where we have allowed individuals, strong men who have just wanted to be in the incumbents, have changed their constitutions in order to extend their period in office, who have rigged the elections to extend their period in office, does not reflect the majority opinion on the continent.
Right, right. And actually, just a quick follow-up. Why do you think, I'm interested to know your thoughts on why you think so few leaders such as yourself have stepped up and really put your voice out there on these issues. You know, I remember back to 2008 in the situation in Zimbabwe, and you were one of the very few leaders at the time to be speaking out, about Mugabe's reign and what was happening in the country at that time, particularly with the election that took place that year and the transitional government that followed. Why do so few leaders on the continent join you and speak out? Of course, there's been other leaders from Botswana, Festus Mogai, for example, but there seems to be a very select few. Why do you think that's the case?
Because of self-interest. Because other countries' leaders will not criticize those who have broken with the democratic principles. For example, in SADC, we have a protocol on the conduct of free and fair elections. But when it comes out that elections have been rigged, the protocols that they signed on to themselves have been violated, the others are silent because they also don't want to be criticized when they feel they are going to resort to undemocratic means of staying in power. So it's sort of like an old boys club where they just feel they must rally behind each other. There must be this kind of solidarity behind them, whereby under any circumstances, they will not stand up to criticize, because one day they may be in the same situation and they would not want their neighbors or those in the region to criticize them. It's like similarly when you've had these coups in Western Africa and you have got military governments, you'll find very, very quickly, overnight, literally, the regional group will suspend that country
Yeah.
and its military government. The African Union will suspend the country as a member. But they never, ever lifted their voices to confront the leaders who were engaged in a type of governance which was corrupt, which was undemocratic, which you could see one day could lead to a coup taking place.
Yeah.
So when they take over, they're quick to criticize, but they say nothing when the incumbents who have been heads of state embark on the same kind of autocracy that maybe the military governments are engaged in.
Exactly. And it gives citizens a false hope, right? That the military will somehow come in and sweep the slate clean. Yeah.
Well, you see, when the military take over, people are hoping that there will be a new order, that
Right.
things will change for the better in their lives. Unfortunately, that does happen under the military government. And you saw the celebration, like you've just referred to, in Zimbabwe in 2017, that people were hoping for the best. But now they say it's even worse than before.
Which is more typically the case, right? I can't think, honestly, sitting here today, of one example in which, a military regime comes to power by coup and it actually ushers in a genuine democracy in the long term. Maybe Portugal in the 1970s, or some people use Ghana as an example, but, you can't make the exception the rule, of course. So switching gears just a bit, but to follow up on the main point you were just making, I wanted to sort of talk about current events a bit. In the Trump administration, for example, today is placing greater emphasis on what they call commercial diplomacy over traditional foreign aid and support for democratic initiatives. So it really seems to me that these issues are not and should not be considered as mutually exclusive. So I wanted to ask you, how do you assess the importance of democracy in driving economic growth? What was your experience in Botswana? And what is your response to the crowd that is very vocal, of course, that we know, who claim that authoritarian leadership or strongman rule, rather than adherence to basic democratic principles, is the real catalyst for economic development? What is your pushback to that?
When you talked about democracy and economic performance, democracy, usually where democracy is practiced, usually it will translate into good governance. It means there's good governance. And where there's good governance, it pretty automatically would bring about prudent economic management. That is my experience. That is my understanding. So when you come along and you have these strongmen and they try to push their own agendas, if those agendas, like what normally happens, is something which entrenches incumbency and promotes self-interest, you mentioned this, the situation in the United States, you mentioned about Donald Trump. Look what's going on now in the United States, where he always was talking about putting the economy on his front foot, wanting to bring about economic first, make America great again, and all those kind of slogans. But then look how it's being addressed. Look how you've got situations whereby the military are being sent into certain cities based on the political leadership of those cities. Look at how people are being rounded up and being deported from America. Everything that's going on in that country internally is very, very undemocratic.
Yes.
And you're going to find, as you are seeing, that a number of the economic indicators, the cost of living is going up in that country as a result. You'll see inflation has been going up. Even though some of the indicators on the S&P and all those may be, because those go up and down, whatever the wind is doing. But that does not mean to say that on the ground, people in their homes, in their houses, are finding that their standard of living is improving.
Right.
So with with democracy comes good governance, and with good governance comes with prudent economic management. Look at some of the strongmen that are most prominent. You mentioned Zimbabwe.
Yep.
There's a strongman. That country's economy. You see what's happening there. Look
Exactly.
at Russia.
Yeah.
No, look what's happening. In that country with a strongman. It just isn't working. As much as people want good economic performance, they also want their freedoms because their day-to-day lives always also matters. So people should want to be able to come and go as they please, to do as they please, to say as they please. And you don't want an autocratic system whereby maybe you're benefiting, but then you're feeling like you're in a prison anyway. And where in prison, you're given food every day. But do people prefer to be in prison getting food, or they'd rather be outside, looking to try to make ends meet and have their freedoms?
Absolutely. And, you mentioned, the red flags and the warning signs that have been really evident in the United States for a generation now, but particularly going back the last decade, when now President Trump came on the scene. In another country that you're most familiar with, that we've seen the warning signs flashing for quite some time is Tanzania. So I wanted to ask you about that because you've been very outspoken about the recent, and I hesitate to call it an election, so I'll call it an electoral charade. The electoral charade that took place in Tanzania, where the president, of course, claimed a staggering 98% of the vote, which is frankly implausible, while opposition leader Tundu Lissu and others remain imprisoned on treason charges. Since then, of course, I'm sure you've seen credible reports have indicated that hundreds, perhaps even thousands, of opposition supporters have been killed. So, given this alarming situation, what message would you deliver, particularly to the frustrated youth of Tanzania and even others across the region who are yearning and sometimes dying in the streets, simply for their voices to be heard? What realistic steps, concrete steps, can they take to challenge autocracy and push forward these democratic reforms that you hold dear, that you saw be successful in Botswana?
The most effective way is to protest. But when I talk about protest, I don't mean going out onto the streets to give where the security forces will have an opportunity to tear gas you, to beat you up, to arrest you, and even to kill you. What the protest form that I would ever find the most suitable is where people reserve their work. They don't go out to work. People stay in their homes en masse. They stay in their homes, they withdraw their services, and they don't go out. That'll bring about a collapse to the nation. And you can't go into people's house and start beating them up all over the country. You don't have enough troops to do that. You can't force people to go and work. You can't shoot them in their own homes. That would be the best form, because the last thing we want to see is people losing their lives when they protest. So the other thing is that when Tanzania, as it does, belongs to, I think, two regional bodies, both the East African Community and SADC. If the leaders in those regional bodies, in their summits, do not take a stand to call out what has happened in Tanzania, they do not come out and say they do not recognize the outcome of the election, then they are complicit in what has happened there. They are responsible as well for what has happened, and they are should be blamed and should be shamed as much as the Tanzanians themselves who have engaged in this. That election, like you say, where you have a leader who will go to any extent to stay in power by rigging an election, as what she did in Tanzania, would get their security forces before, during, and even now as we speak, continuing to target pro-democracy and human rights activists. Those are the kind of people who are totally illegitimate. That woman is not the president of Tanzania, in my opinion, should not be recognized as the president of Tanzania, is not in any way legitimate. And there should be a new election under some form of international supervision, so that when you talk about the youth, and the general populace in Tanzania can have a genuine election to bring about a governance structure which will actually serve their interests. Because what they have now is a North Korea.
Yeah, you're right. And of course, Tanzania is not an isolated case, right? Just in the past few weeks, we've had the sham election in Cameroon take place, where Paul Biya is now serving his eighth term in office at 93 years old. You had the president of Cote d'Ivoire change the constitution and run for a third term. We have the upcoming elections in January in Uganda, which is shaping up to be another violent affair. So this certainly extends well beyond Tanzania, and we'll certainly need more voices like yours speaking up. I just hope more heed the call and join you in that endeavor. I think it's really important, particularly as African institutions like SADC, you mentioned, continue to fail the people across the board and unequivocally.
In every country where a leader has changed the constitution to provide for a third term, those should be considered illegitimate.
Yeah.
All those who have disqualified opposition leaders, every opposition leader who has been disqualified from running an election, that leader should be considered illegitimate who has done that. All the parties which have been disqualified from running an election, those leaders who are now president should be considered illegitimate. And where they have rigged elections, all those leaders should be, no matter what the results were. And you talked about 97%. Who wins an election by 97%, other than if you had a sham election in North Korea? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Rwanda, which is not too far away from Tanzania. Perhaps they're taking lessons from there. But I did want to ask you before we go, and as we bring this conversation to a close, I would like to address the complexities that often accompany the legacies that leaders such as yourself leave behind. So your presidency is often cited for its positive transformation, both on the democratic and economic fronts, and its influence really across the region. Yeah, some critics also point to your military background. They cite moments during your tenure in which civil liberties were curtailed. So, number one, how do you reflect on these criticisms? And number two, what lessons should current and future leaders across Africa and the world really take from your experience, both your successes and the challenges you faced when it comes to balancing these really complex issues like security, like freedom, and the pursuit of democratic governance? I'd really love your thoughts on that.
You know, having been in the military gives you a certain style of leadership. And in the military, we were brought up as leaders to put the welfare of our men and women, before anything else. And that is something that I carried on even into my presidency. In the military, you're taught about delivery, that things should happen. I, during my presidency, wanted to see things happen quickly and decisively because I wanted to serve the people in the most efficient way. Then fine, I can be criticized for having done things that way. But there was no incident at all where any civil liberty was curbed. And I would challenge anyone to produce a single example. And without wanting to blow my own trumpet, why would I have been honored with awards in leadership if that was the case? Why, when I was there, did Botswana's rankings in democracies continue to improve? Why were we the least corrupt country on the continent every single year that I was in office? And our world rankings also improved in that way. I have just recently been honored by being conferred with another honorary doctorate, a third one now, in recognition of my time in terms of leadership. So those would have just been people in opposition at the time who were trying to discredit one, which is the kind of thing they do, and in order not to try to give themselves a better chance of coming into office. So I'm very proud of what I achieved, and I reached out more to people than any other leader in our country has ever done, going around and engaging with people to find out. And that's what the military taught us as well, is that you go out constantly to the troops to talk to them, to listen to them, and address any issues that they did. And I did that regularly around the country. And I went to all countries of Botswana at the time when I was president, like no other. And then I fashioned programs and policies based on the feedback I got from people in order to improve their standard of living and their welfare. And unfortunately, a lot of what I did then, by my immediate successor, ended a lot of those programs and policies, and that's partly why Botswana is now struggling.
Mr. President, thank you for sharing your wisdom with me today. Your commitment to democratic values over the years really continues to light a path forward, not only for Africa, but for really all of those who yearn for freedom and accountability. And as I mentioned, in an era when too many have chosen to be silent in the face of these abuses and these stolen elections, your steadfast voice and your example, I think, should remind leaders of the profound responsibility that they hold. And I think your leadership really sets a standard that resonates far beyond Botswana's borders, offering hope and guidance at a time when clarity is needed now more than ever. So as you forge ahead and you continue your important work, know that your resolve lifts us all, encouraging us to speak more boldly and to act more proudly. So stay safe and healthy in the meantime, and know that our solidarity travels with you. Thank you so much.